I encourage you to go live. Yeah, we're just waiting to make sure the cameras in the back are good. So this is not brought to you by Pfizer, just to be clear. Okay, let's start off with our land acknowledgement. I am standing on the permanently ceded land under Treaty 6 in the town of Leduc in the province of Alberta, and one day, the nation of Alberta. Now, we had one person leave after I did that at one of our events. They're like, "You're a liar, out of here," and he left. We have male and female bathrooms only, so if you're looking for anything else, I apologize. Tip your waitress, we're here all week. You're allowed to stream, so please, I encourage that. Take pictures, do little clips, post it, give credit, heckle, do whatever you want. This is actually about truth, so I don't mind if you dislike something and you post it, or if you want to mention, one of our great speakers, please tag them as well. I do want to take a quick moment here because I'm surprised. We have a legend in the room, Mr. Keith Wilson. Yeah. So if you don't like what I have to say, there's our lawyer right there, all right? Talk to him. But yeah, very pleased that you were able to make it out, and all of you were able to make it out with that road out there. They tried whatever they could to stop us, huh? You guys had your winters and all seasons on, so you're good to go. I really appreciate you all being here. I'm Jason Lavigne, host of the Lavigne Show and host of this event. I want to make it really clear, this is not a Stay Free Alberta event. This is not an APP, Alberta Prosperity Project event. It's the Lavigne Show. We are a third-party advertiser. We're registered. We're able to do these kind of things. So I just want to make that clear so there's no confusion. You are welcome to visit the tables outside, pick up some tallow, a hat, maybe a t-shirt, or leave your signature behind. Everything's available for you out there. Tonight we're going to have 4 speakers for you, and some of the best I can get at here in Alberta, and one that came from outside of Alberta. I'll let him explain that to you. We're here to have a conversation and some speeches. I've brought 4 different subject matter experts to you, and then we're going to get into some Q&A. I'm not going to share my opinion, because under the third-party advertiser, I got to be careful. Right, lawyer? Yeah, get a little nod over there. But I want to make sure you guys enjoy yourself. So the Q&A is completely open. It is being streamed. You don't have to put your face on anything. We'll take the microphone over there. You can ask your questions, and we'll get the answers to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with one of my favorite speakers. She's a homegrown, grassroots, boots on the ground. When I called her and said, "Hey, you want to be part of the speaking gig?" She said, "Sorry, I couldn't take your call earlier. I was dealing with the farm." I'm like, perfect, perfect. This is exactly what we need, because we need people who understand what to be Albertan means, what it means to be on the farm, why it's under attack, and some of the numbers as well when it comes to pension. And I know that somebody that came in wanted to make sure their pension was safe. You're in the right spot to hear that conversation. So without further ado, Tanya Clemens. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for giving up your evening to come and to have this discussion and participate in civil discourse. I think that's something that we're often missing nowadays, and I appreciate that you're willing to come listen, to ask some questions, and hopefully get some great answers to your questions. So I come here tonight, as Jason said, not as a politician or a constitutional lawyer or an economist. I'm a farmer, a teacher, and a mom. And I love this land with everything I've got. This is actually my Alberta flag here. I don't know if you've seen it on my Instagram, but it's the same one that I fly on my combine. I look at that flag and I think of the thousands and thousands of people and the decades and decades of effort that have brought us here today. All the work, all the courage, all the conversations that led to this moment, signing a petition to force a referendum on independence in Alberta and delivering us this hope. This is the same flag I fly on my combine, and every harvest, as I would walk out in the morning, I would see that flag waving above my cab of my combine. Oops. I saw my family working together. One would be running the grain carts, another one on the combine, another one hauling the load of grain in the semi. And in those quiet moments, I felt peace. I wasn't thinking about Ottawa. I wasn't thinking about politics. I was thinking about the land, the sky, the work before us, and the people I love. And that's what freedom feels like to me in my little corner of Alberta. And maybe that's why this matters so much to me, because when I look out at the field and I see that flag, I don't just see my farm. I see the Canada I was raised in, the Canada that I believed existed. A place where if you worked hard, you could build something. A place where your effort meant something. A place where decisions were made close to home and not handed down from far away. And I still believe in that. I don't believe we've totally left that behind. I believe we can still protect it right here in this little part of Canada called Alberta, where working hard is respected, where family matters and where life is built and not governed. But over the past decade, that freedom has felt more fragile than ever. Every year, decisions are made further and further away that reach deeper into our homes, our businesses, our farms, and even our bank accounts. So tonight, I'm not here to tell you what to think or even necessarily to convince you, but I am going to ask you a few honest questions that I've had to sit with myself, because an independence referendum is coming. And when you walk into that voting poll in October and you check that box on your ballot, I want you to fully understand the significance of that X. I hope we all walk into that voting poll on referendum day and actually pause for a moment. An opportunity like that may not present itself ever again. So I hope you spend a moment in the reverence of answering the most important question that Albertans will likely ever answer. So I have 5 questions that I believe every Albertan should ask themselves in anticipation of a referendum on Alberta independence. The first one is, when you look honestly at Alberta today, are we better off than we were a generation ago? Not just in how we feel, but in opportunity, affordability, and confidence in the future. Because housing costs have exploded, gasoline prices are crazy, energy bills are higher, young families are stretched thin. You feel it every time you fill your tank and every time you walk into the grocery store. And for the first time in Alberta's history, many of our kids don't automatically believe their future will be better than their parents. From the very beginning, Alberta was never meant to be equal. This is how we were brought into Confederation. It was in 1904, Clifford Sifton, the federal minister responsible for bringing Alberta into Confederation, said openly, "We desire that the great trade and wealth of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to our prosperity." That wasn't about Alberta's prosperity. That was about using Alberta as a colony to fund Ontario and Quebec. And at the end of the day, who should decide Alberta's future? Oh, sorry. The second question. At the end of the day, who should decide Alberta's future? Ottawa or the people who live here? Who controls our resources? Who sets our priorities? And then who bears the consequences of the decisions being made? Because right now, policies written thousands of kilometers away are shaping how we heat our homes, fuel our vehicles, run our farms, and operate our businesses. Albertans elect provincial governments, but Ottawa overrides them. Part of the problem is that Canada spans 6 time zones and very, very different ways of life. And governing from that one center means decisions are made far from those who actually live there. And history shows this tension is not new. Decade after decade, this tension has grown. Probably one of the clearest examples came in 1980 with the National Energy Program, where Marc Lalonde, who was Pierre Trudeau's energy minister, said their plan was to stop Alberta from becoming the economic powerhouse of this country. They just couldn't let that happen. So imagine, they've seen Alberta rising and deliberately cut us down. And they've kept cutting. And I think sometimes we make this conversation more complicated than it needs to be, because at its core, it comes down to something pretty simple. Who gets to make decisions about Alberta? Is it the people who live here or the people that don't? Third question. If Alberta consistently gives more than it receives, how long is that sustainable? And that's not just resentment, that's actual math. And the scale of that financial impact is larger than most people realize. Since 1961, Alberta has sent over $800 billion more to Ottawa than we've ever received back anything for. And 2 out of every 3 of those dollars went straight to Quebec. Every single year, we lose 20 to 28 billion, and some of the newer numbers suggest it's over 40 billion. And that's about $6,000 per Albertan. Or for the average family of 4, $24,000 that gets sent to Ottawa that you don't get any services back for. That's money that's gone with nothing in return. And then there's Ottawa's refusal to let us sell our oil and gas to international markets, which costs us another $26.5 billion per year. And when you start looking at what those numbers could mean if they stayed here, the numbers become really hard to ignore. Independent projections show Alberta could retain roughly $70 billion per year in federal taxes. And even after replacing federal programs and services, the projections are showing Alberta could still run a significant annual surplus in the range of $20 to $40 billion. That's not just a small adjustment, that's a completely different financial position. That would allow us to quickly pay off our provincial debt and to grow a sovereign fund that would one day largely fund all of Alberta, providing that stability and that certainty that we crave. Fourth question, and this is the one that probably weighs on me the most. What happens if we just do nothing? If we just coast along like we are right now? What if we mistake inaction for stability? Because standing still is still a decision, and every decision has consequences. Doing nothing does not preserve the Alberta that we love. It actually allows it to be slowly replaced. Now, some people will ask, can't we just fix this from within Canada? Can't we negotiate a fairer deal? Let's give our provincial government a little bit more of a chance. But we've actually been trying as Albertans for over a century, and every time, Ottawa has slammed the door in our faces. We mentioned the 1980s when we had the National Energy Program and how billions were lost and Alberta's future was deliberately stifled. In 1987 and 1992, that was the Meech Lake and the Charlottetown Accords, both constitutional reform attempts failed. And this is important to know and understand why. Because to amend Canada's constitution, you need to clear 4 impossible for Alberta barriers. The first hurdle is you need 7 out of 10 provinces to agree, representing 50% of the population. So unless you get Quebec and Ontario, who have 60% of the population, that's a pretty insurmountable hurdle. The second hurdle is you need a majority in the House of Commons. The third hurdle is you need a majority in the Senate. And even if somehow miraculously you got past those first 3 hurdles, the fourth one is quite the killer, because Quebec has basically a de facto veto vote. So let's be honest, the chance of forcing a constitutional change, such as removing the equalization program, is 0. In the 1990s, we had the Reform Party, which was born out of Western frustration, and it called for Senate reform and decentralization, and Ottawa ignored it. In 2001, we had the firewall letter, and some of Alberta's intellectuals demanded that we should have control of our pensions, our policing, our taxation. Does that sound kind of familiar? Because 25 years later, we're still asking for the very same things. In 2019, we had the Fair Deal panel, and once again, Albertans asked for fairness, and once again, Ottawa's answer was more centralization. And in 2021, we had the equalization referendum, where 62% of Albertans voted to abolish equalization. But knowing what it takes to open the Constitution to do that, Ottawa just laughed at us and totally ignored us. Every single time Alberta has tried to reform this federation, we've been blocked, mocked, or punished. So let's be clear, it's not that we haven't tried. We have tried for 120 years. Every time Alberta tries, the answer is no. And that's why this moment matters more than any we've faced before, because this isn't just another conversation. It's not just another panel, a report, or an election promise. This is the first real opportunity in our lifetime to force the question, to put it directly in the hands of Albertans. This phase right now matters. Signing the petition, having those conversations, and showing up. And my 5th question is this: what kind of Alberta do you want to leave behind? For our children, for our grandchildren, for the people who will farm this land after us, who will raise grandchildren after us, for their businesses, long, long after we're gone. What do you want that to look like? Because we don't wake up one day and just lose freedom. We wake up one day and we realize we stopped protecting it, and sometimes it's a little bit too late. So do we want to leave behind an Alberta that's more dependent or more self-determined? It brings us face to face with courage, I think. And that's where this conversation really lives. And if there's one thing Albertans understand, it's courage. This province wasn't built by people who waited until everything felt certain. It was built by people who looked out at open land, long winters, and a lot of unknowns, and decided anyway, I think I can make a life here. Not because it was guaranteed to work, but because it was worth trying. We're seeing more questions around freedom of expression and who gets to decide what gets said when. We're seeing decisions made at a level far removed from the people they affect. We're seeing the facts that we really don't have very much property rights in this country. All of those things gradually keep happening and adding up until one day you look around and realize things don't feel the same anymore. So before we leave tonight, let me return just once to all 5 questions. Are we actually better off than we were a generation ago? Who should decide Alberta's future? How long can an unsustainable system last? What happens if we do nothing? And finally, what kind of Alberta do we want to pass on? You don't have to answer all those questions tonight, but one day soon, probably by October 19th, you will. And when that day comes, I hope that you choose courage over complacency, self-determination over surrender. Because this province was built by people who believed they could, and we still can. Thank you very much.
How was that? Some good news and some bad news for you all. The good news is there's an open bar. The bad news is it was under an MOU. It's been delayed. Sorry. You liked that one, did you? Yeah, so Tanya, she's amazing. She's articulate, and she's doing a great job getting this information out there. And our next one, oh, we got a little wave there. Our next one is Marty, because he didn't mind which order we went into, so we're going to bring him up next. He's an engineer, and he's an influencer. He's somebody online doing a lot of good work. He will tell you the truth. He'll do it with facts, and he will never give you anything but the hard truth sometimes, too. No BS out of him. So without further ado, Marty.
All right. Everybody smile. Cool. All right, cool. Thanks. I need to be over here? All right, I'll be over here. Actually, Tanya didn't want to ask the question, but I do want to ask the question. Who's better off now than they were in 2012? And you can answer honestly, because perhaps there are some people here who are better off than they were in 2012. Maybe you came from, I don't know, Ukraine, and there's peace here somewhat, or something different. Maybe you retired, maybe you're getting your pension. But who's better off than they were in 2012? Wow. All right, okay, all right, so one person, that's awesome. And I think that's part of the theme today, right? Like, we're not better off, and you're going to hear that. But all right, look at me. I'm all tan right now, right? People think you're tan. Where are you just coming back from Mexico? No, I'm not coming back from Mexico. You know why I'm tanned? I've been sitting on the side of the highway for about 25 of the last 45 days, collecting signatures. Okay, that's how, because I'm not better off than I was in 2012. And I want to do something about it, right? So I've been on the side of the road with my wife, and an amazing crew. We set up a pop-up. It's great. I'm spending about 4 or 5 hours a day there, collecting 100 signatures a day between 4 of us that are there. So it's 4 or 5 signatures an hour, but it's worth putting in the effort. And at the end of my little quick talk, that'll be one of my asks from you guys, is that I need more effort. We need more effort because this is so important. But so why did I become a separatist, right? So I'll tell you my quick story, and actually I adjust my story every night, and I'm going to adjust it a little bit because there's an important gentleman in this room. Nick, please stand up. So that's my son, Nick. So I have 4 adult children. All right, thanks, Nick. So, so full disclosure, I'm from Ontario, graduated engineering in 1989. And actually, I want to tell you a quick story before that. I told this story yesterday. When I was in grade 11, my father got called to the school, and sat in the principal's office, and I had to sit with the principal and listen to the principal tell my dad that that kid won't amount to anything. And my father wasn't too worried about that at the time, because my father lived in a Canada that doesn't exist anymore. My father lived in a Canada where he knew that Marty's just going to work hard and he'll be fine. So Dad had confidence in me, and my father, like many people in this room, my father only wanted one thing for his kids, and that was for us to do better than he did. And I think I did that, but I challenged my son, because he's smiling right now. Generationally, I think the next generation of Canadians won't do as well as we did. The future is not that bright for them. Nick's smiling at me. Nick's saying, challenge accepted, but that's cool. But Nick also signed the independence petition. So I moved from Ontario, and I graduated from Ontario. The economy was tough in Ontario, and I moved out west. Going through school, I had the opportunity to come work here. They're called co-op terms. So I worked in Slave Lake, and I worked in Burstall, Saskatchewan. And when I graduated, I accepted a job out west. I accepted a job in Fox Creek, Alberta. And so, you know, I packed all my stuff, landed in Fox Creek, and life was good. So I started my career in Fox Creek in 89, 90. And typical, you know, future so bright, everything was going good for me. I was working my butt off and progressing through the ranks in the oil patch. And I'll never forget this either. When I got there and we were drilling wells and stuff like that, the guys told me, Marty, don't get too settled, because this oil will be gone soon and you'll need to move along. Well, that was 35 years ago. And we saw what happened in the Strait of Hormuz right now. So oil's here to stay. But anyways, so I worked my career, I started progressing, everything was good. And if you ask, and right now you guys think I'm political, but I don't want to be political. I mean, I'm basically retired now. I'd like nothing more than just be left alone. But I have to take on the fight right now, because there's an existential fight on our hands. Ottawa doesn't like us, and I'll tell you a specific story. But, you know, so I'm progressing through the ranks, I'm moving up as an engineer, and if you ask Marty in around 2004, you know, hey, you're paying extra taxes, they're going to Ottawa and they're being wasted. What do you think about that? As a typical Albertan, I would have said, I don't care. I'm doing my part for Canada. We're over contributing, so what? My kids are playing hockey, I got a nice truck, the house is, you know, on its way to being paid off, and I got gas for the sled. So I didn't care. And I continued moving like that until about 2012, 13, 14, right? So we remember in 2014, we had that first downturn in the economy, and the oil dipped down to $14 a barrel, and it got a little hard for us. But anybody who'd been in Alberta for a long time knew that this is just another cycle. It's no big deal, right? And what did we do as Albertans? Well, when the price of oil is down like that, we build infrastructure and we get ready for the upturn. And so we wanted to build infrastructure. We wanted to build a couple of pipelines. And remember, we've been basically paying extra taxes to Ottawa all this time, and we think of it as sort of an insurance policy, right? So the economy's taking a downturn. We call on Ottawa. It's like, hey, can you lend us a hand? And we weren't even asking for physical or for monetary hand. We're just like, hey, we need to build a couple of pipelines. We belong to this thing called Confederation. We're supposed to help each other as provinces. So can we get a pipeline built Energy East to the east, or can we get one to the west? Can we get something? And Ottawa said no. They blocked us, right? So we're like, okay, well, that's a little disappointing, but what do we do as Albertans? We put our heads down and we just kept on going, and we worked. And then all of a sudden 2014 and 15 comes around, and then Trudeau gets elected and Notley gets elected. And not only are they not helping us, but now they're starting to hinder us, interfere. So, you know, they want to pass carbon taxes, and they want to pass, you know, they want to block our trade. They want us to build a grid that's net zero. They want us to drive electric vehicles. They want us to do things that we don't agree with. But because of the way Confederation is designed, and you've heard Keith and others talk about this, we'll never get our say in this because they outnumber us. Tanya said it, right? 60% of the population lives in Ontario and Quebec. So it doesn't matter even if we had a proportionate kind of representation, they outnumber us. And they have silly ideas. So they're interfering, but then the interference goes to a next step. Now they're actually trying to push us down, and they're trying to take away things that are really important to us, like our property rights. They want to take away our firearms. They want to do things that they've gone from not helping to interfering to downright threatening us. And so, and for me, that was an absolute awakening, and I became a diehard separatist. I'm not even going to talk about COVID, because COVID put me over the top to a whole new level. And then like most people, I almost thought that we might, I got worried because I thought, okay, maybe, Trudeau was helping us, our movement. I thought, oh, maybe the next guy will interfere and do something nice. Because I've always been worried that they might do something temporarily nice. Because we've tried long-term solutions, right? We've tried the Meech Lake Accord and all those things. And I thought, ooh, we might get a guy here who will cancel the equalization payments. Well, Carney got elected, and ask anybody on the APP, the day after Carney got elected, we signed up like, what, Keith, hundreds of thousands of volunteers and people who pledged. Carney is the best salesman for independence that we've ever had. I'll tell you a quick story. When I'm on the side of the road some days, I'm a media influencer, but when I'm on the side of the road, I get disconnected. I don't actually know what's going on in the world temporarily for those 6 hours. And I had days where I'd be sitting there and all of a sudden there'd be like a flood of people coming to sign the petition. And I'd be like, what just happened, right? And be like, oh, somebody crossed the floor. Okay, that's awesome. And people would instantly react. Oh, we bought LNG from Australia, which will lead to the last story I want to tell you, right? So, there is an awakening. I'm running out of time here, but I want to tell you one quick story personally, because you guys know me as an influencer, but I did have a pretty cool career. I did work for some big major oil companies. I was the director of pipelines for TransCanada, and I worked for a company called Paraday trying to advance a project in Nova Scotia, an LNG project. And I want to talk about it because of what happened last week. And I'm bound by these confidentiality agreements, but I don't care. I'm going to tell you a story. So in 2013, we sold LNG worth $35 billion to the German government, okay? And we signed a deal quietly in Halifax without fanfare, and that's the way the Germans wanted it, because admitting that they were buying LNG from us was an admission that their transition to green had failed miserably. So we did the deal. $35 billion, 20 years worth of natural gas, 10 million metric tons per year. And the deal was so important to the Germans that they gave us loan guarantees worth $4.5 billion. They wanted this to happen. And so we did the engineering, we spent $100 million, we wasted 3 years of my life advancing this project, getting the engineering, the preliminary design done. So I got a whole bunch of permits, I was ready to start construction, I just needed some money, right? Part of our plan was to go borrow a large amount of money. And as we were getting ready to borrow that money, the German government asked for something pretty reasonable. They said, before we give you this loan guarantee or you exercise it, we'd like some assurances from your government that they're on board with this. So we tried getting letters from various levels of government to show support for this. Trudeau wouldn't give us a letter, right? And you know after the fact that the Chancellor of Germany came back 2-3 times, but Trudeau wouldn't give us a letter of support. He passed me on to Amarjeet Sohi, all right, who became the mayor, who was like the energy minister at the time. Think of how ridiculous that is. Well, I didn't get the letter from him. I didn't get a letter from Nova Scotia. Actually, ironically, the only person who gave me a letter, and I still have the letter at home, was Rachel Notley. Because the way we were going to get the gas was we were going to get gas from Alberta all the way to Nova Scotia. It's a torturous path. We can get there, but at least some, and I have that letter at home, and I'm sure that the day after, if Rachel Notley doesn't know she signed that letter, right? Some deputy minister probably slipped it on her desk. She signed it. I have it. I used it. It was for nothing. In the end, it was for nothing because we couldn't get the money. And the reason we couldn't get the money is we were meeting big banks from Malaysia, from all over the world. And you have no idea how frustrating it is to be in a meeting with one of those big banks and be told that you're too risky. Love your project, but Canada is too risky. So in 2016-17, we were perceived by the rest of the world as a banana republic. And in fact, I use the word banana all the time. To me, you've heard of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. In Canada, it's banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. So, and we did that to ourselves. Our government did that to ourselves. But this is just an example that I want to reinforce. There's a bunch of reasons why we need to separate. It's to protect ourselves. It's to protect our future. It's for economic reasons. But at the end of the day, anybody who thinks we're going to change Ottawa's mind, we're not. It's been tried. It'll never happen. They don't think like us. They don't like us. In fact, I'm pretty sure they want to keep the resources in the ground until we're gone, and then they'll exploit the resources. So that's my story. You got a lot of great speakers, but just my call to action, please. Yes, I think this phase is pretty easy. We have amazing people. Who here is a canvasser? Oh my God, look at that. All right, thank you for doing that. So we have amazing canvassers. I think we will have enough signatures to trigger the referendum, but the real battle is after the referendum is started. It's the campaign. So from June until October, that's the battle, and that's my call to action: is take something away from this. Bring people, even if you've been here before and you are supporting this, bring somebody who's not on board yet, and take away some things. Reach out to us if you want to organize events, if you want us to speak there, if you need talking points, but everybody here needs to bring one person to one of these events. So otherwise, thanks for coming out, folks, and we'll be around.
How was that, everybody? So I'm pleased because there's some younger people here today. So if you're under 40, raise your hands. I can't. Nice try. Yes. Thank you very much for being here. Right on, Max. Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate that, because this actually affects you and your future as well, just as much as it affected us. Did you know that just about 10 years ago or so, the average first home buyer, the age of the first home buyer was 24? Do you know what it is now? 44. So now it takes 20 years to save up that down payment. That would have been your mortgage. You would have had that house free and clear. Now you're moving in 20 years later. This is all about the pocketbook for a lot of people. And some of us are already there. Some of us have our pensions and a retirement and we're good to go. But what about our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren? I just saw 2 beautiful pictures earlier tonight. This is important. So the financial portion and the numbers, and I brought one of the best. Fergus, author and a great man. And he's the only one to put his hand up because he actually moved to Colorado.
Thanks so much, Jason. Yeah, I'm just super motivated and pleased to be here. This is the #1 movement for freedom and self-determination on the planet. I've spent my adult life, looking for freedom around the world, and this is it. This is where people should be focusing their efforts. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to unpack that from 2 angles. The first is why this is so important in the arc of history in the world. And the second is why Alberta, or how Alberta can be and will be the freest nation on the planet. And so the first bit is just, I should actually explain a little bit of my story. I am the son of a Canadian. My mother was a firstborn child of Irish immigrants on a Indian reserve up in northern British Columbia. And I planned to make a home here in Alberta, and I was in business school in the United States. And just during the COVID era, I just gave up on that idea, to be frank. But I first came here looking for work and began working in 2008. And so that gave me the material for my book, Financial Sovereignty for Canadians. And at the time, I've been a big advocate for Alberta independence for many years. But at the time, I didn't realize it would gain momentum, and that's why I'm so excited about it. Many of us have been hoping for this for a long time. And so in my book, I had just 1 chapter about that. The subtitle is Untether Yourself from the Ottawa Leviathan. And 1 chapter was, basically, I addressed, should you leave the country? I just said, Alberta should just leave. Right? The chapter is, Wexit is the path forward. Okay, so the current prognosis for Canada is terrible. Canada is on a path to being a post-First World nation. This doesn't happen often, but some nations, such as Argentina, have achieved this. Argentina used to be like Canada, one of the most advanced or developed countries in the world, and now it is not. A century has passed, and they're in decline. Why? Because of protectionism, because of stupid ideas, because of socialism. They have a highly educated population. They're very European. You think to yourself, how is this country such a disaster? Nothing works there. I lived there for a year. They have inflation. Their currency isn't respected anymore. Okay, so that is the path. If you want to know where Canada is going, you can go to Atlantic Canada right now, to be frank. If you go to Nova Scotia, people have been leaving for 50 years. They've been moving here to Alberta because Alberta still has the work ethic, it still has the opportunity. But of course, now the problem is people are leaving to go south to Texas or Wyoming or Montana or wherever it may be, or Tennessee. And so that is the path. If Canada is stuck in a rut and it needs a disruption, and people have mentioned this before, the previous speakers, the challenge is that you cannot fix it from within the system that exists. The structure is set and it is toxic. So, so my basic view is that this will actually be a three-part win, or a win-win-win outcome if Alberta achieves this. First, of course, Alberta will have an incredibly dynamic, renewed, and more accountable economy than it has right now. Second, Canada, or Ottawa, will have to tighten its belt. It'll have to grow up. It'll have to learn to pay its own bills. In fact, rather than being an imperial city over this large, landmass, it'll have to be accountable, because if it does not change its ways and stop preying on the provinces, more provinces will leave. Obviously, Saskatchewan will be next in line, Quebec, and so their power is threatened greatly. They will have to change from being an overlord to being a server to the provinces, which will be healthy for Canada. And the third one is for the rest of the world, basically. There are literally hundreds of secession movements around the planet. And so I'm a big fan of Texas, or Texit, of Ireland leaving the European Union, of Cortés, a part of Honduras, become a new country in Central America. And the problem is that we have this cognitive bias. We feel more comfortable with what we know than what we don't know. But of course, if we flip the equation and say, if Alberta were independent, would we join Canada? Never. So we know we have this bias that we just feel more comfortable in what we know rather than we don't. And that is impeding all these movements. If Alberta separates, it can be a role model to the world, because they can do it. Albertans can do it peacefully, and they can have incredible prosperity. They will show that it's possible, and they can do it in a much better way than, say, Brexit did out of the European Union, because the political class of Brexit, or the UK, did not want to comply with this. Whereas in Alberta, there's such a different polity from the rest of Canada, the distinction will be clear. So Alberta can really have an impact on the broader global landscape. And this is particularly important because there was a book written in 1992 called The End of History and the Last Man by Francis Fukuyama. And he discussed the fact that we'd basically arrived after the post-Soviet Union era, that we had this liberal democracy and we're going to basically settle in and just, everything would be rosy. It has not happened. In fact, we've been going backwards. Since that time, we have less democratic accountability. We've had more tyranny. And of course, the COVID era just brought a new level of autocracy, or of overgovernance. And so not just Canada, but more broadly speaking, we're stuck in a rut to some degree in terms of economic freedom, in terms of advancing, and Alberta can shake that. Now, so I made the claim, which is not hyperbolic at all, that Alberta can and will be the freest nation on the planet. Now, just one proviso, there aren't many free places to go to. So there's not a lot of competition in this regard. Now, if people are following the rankings of economic freedom around the world, does anyone have an idea which countries are the top right now? Okay, so the United States is 5th, but so it is Hong Kong, Singapore, Switzerland, and New Zealand, and then the United States. And Canada used to be always in the top 10, and she's been hovering around 11th to 14th in recent years, okay? And so the question is, what does Alberta need to surpass those countries? And Ireland is 6th, so I would kick out Hong Kong, because the data needs to be updated for the fact that Hong Kong is basically overrun by the Chinese Communist Party now. But so what would Alberta have to do to surpass those countries? In fact, it would basically be automatic. All the changes that would come with Alberta separating from Canada would be enough to get Canada to Alberta to number 1. So we've had a lot of people talk about transfer payments or equalization or just redistribution. There is a great disparity in terms of government spending as a portion of the economy across the provinces. So, as I noted, Nova Scotia is one of the poorest provinces, maybe the poorest, but more than 60% of the economy in Nova Scotia is just government spending. So it's a hollowed out place, it's a backwater, and it's embarrassing. What economy do they have left? And my uncle is a professor at St. Francis Xavier University, and they just live it. All the young people leave, right? Okay, so if we're spending more than 60% of the economy as government spending in Nova Scotia, what is it in Alberta? 18. Okay, 30%. Mate, you beat me. Okay, so it's less than half of what it is in Nova Scotia. Okay, and what is it in Canada more broadly? It's between those two, obviously, so it's 44%. This is the challenge. The biggest impediment to Canada being a free country is the size of government, right? These rankings have 5 different, or I think it's 5 or 4 different categories. I think it's 5. And size of government, Canada is a winner on the wrong end, right? So it can't even crack the top 100 countries in terms of a smaller government. So it is 102nd. And to assess this, they take, it's quite a complicated formula, but they take spending, highest marginal income tax rate, combined payroll taxes, what have you. We don't need to get into the weeds there. The fact is that if Canada were to go from 44% to 30%, that would basically on its own put Alberta up at the top. However, that's just an automatic change. If Alberta had no central bank and had currency competition, that would also put the Albertans up to the top, right? Because it would be like Panama, where you can choose the currency, and whether we use the loonie or the US dollar or a cryptocurrency, what have you, that would be the ideal scenario. The best would rise to the top. There are many other changes. Now, there's one important element, which many of you here, I'm sure, are familiar with, the fact that Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms has no right to property. This is insane. This is a departure from Western civilization. It is a deliberate departure. The NDP, the people who got together to, I think it was in the 60s, who put the charter together, I'm sorry, someone correct me on the date. When was the charter? It was in Prince Edward Island? 82, okay. I know because one of the guys is still alive, unless he died recently, I can't keep track. Yeah, he's still around. And anyway, so there was a deliberate omission of property, which is fundamental to Western civilization. The Enlightenment, coming from the British Isles, a key ingredient from the likes of John Locke and Adam Smith was property. Canada has rejected that. And Albertans, because they're more rural, because they have a resource-oriented economy, they understand the importance of this. So the first thing that would go into any Alberta constitution would be right to property. That sets you apart. It's not just a spectrum. It's not just a spectrum of difference. It is a difference of kind, that they do not believe in property. They're, I don't want to use too much hyperbole about socialists, or they have a collectivist notion of property versus individual rights or natural rights. These are irreconcilable differences, you might say. Okay, what was the other one? I had notes here. So basically, there are many other changes that would come with Alberta, and in my opinion, the sky is the limit. However, the fact is that a simple departure from Canada alone would get Alberta to the top without any additional changes, basically, just with the natural proclivities of Albertans and relative continuity. And so, in many ways, Alberta can be the beacon of the free world to come. It can offer basically the freedoms that many Americans promote or tout, but unfortunately the United States fails to deliver those, right? So it's almost like the Declaration of Independence, but in Albertan style. And so I'm very optimistic about that. And okay, I'll leave it there, Jason. Yep. So thanks so much for your attention, and please do consider my book. I'm selling those at the door. Cheers.
So let's fact check that. The property is not included in the charter? So what's property taxes for? Revenue for them, but if I don't own it, well, then what am I paying tax on it for? That's the kind of mess up that we have, isn't it? Now, we do have some questions period coming shortly after our last speaker. So we'll get into things like pension and other things like property as well. And Keith, if you want, you can join us up here as well. I don't know if you charge every 6 minutes or how that works, but we'll try and figure this out. But I do want to welcome my next guest. How many husbands are in this room right now? Raise your hand. And don't be shy. I know you're back in there. So you know you're not the boss, right? You know you're not the boss. It took me over 20 years to figure this out, but I'm there now. Because women and wives and mothers and aunts and sisters, they're the ones that actually make sure that everything's secure, safe, prosperous, and the uncertainty is something that they don't like to deal with. And this is what is all over this particular movement. What's next? How's it going to look? Exactly, tell me what it's like. So we need to have these conversations about the uncertainty. And Angela Tabek is going to do a fantastic job with that. She travels all over with Kathy Flett. It's kind of like Thelma and Louise without the cliff at the end. Sometimes a cliff. But yeah, Angela, my first time having you up, and I'm very pleased to have you here tonight. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. As a young woman in my early 20s, I had a dream of adventure. And I had the opportunity to go over to Europe for a year and a half. And I spent most of my time there living in northern Belgium, literally in Flanders fields. And my roommates at that time were mostly all American. And one of the first phrases that I learned to speak in Flemish was, "Ik ben geen Amerikaner," which means I am no American. And the reason why that was important was literally living in Flanders fields amongst all those wild poppies. All I had to do was say to people, "Ik ben geen Amerikaner, ik ben a Canadian," right? And they would invite me into their homes, and if they were old enough, I heard their stories and their tales of the Canadians that came and fought in their land. And if they weren't old enough, they would tell me about their grandfathers and their grandparents and their experience with the Canadians there. I will never forget the experience of riding my bike through the beautiful Belgian countrysides, along those canals, and stumbling upon a Canadian military cemetery. Getting off that bike and walking amongst those headstones and those poppies, and seeing the ages of those young men who paid the ultimate price for their freedom, for the freedom of the people in Europe, and for our freedoms. When I came back, I spent a few years in Alberta and eventually ended up in California and Silicon Valley for 7 years. When I came back to Alberta finally to stay, after that, I began to realize that the country that I once was so proud of and loved so much was changed. It was no longer there. Or maybe was it that my eyes were opened and I was finally seeing what was happening. Now, tonight, I want to speak briefly about a key element that I believe is missing in Canadian society. And that if, as Albertans, we wish to create a new, lasting, free and prosperous land, we must recapture this element. Now, Tanya tonight talked about the beginnings of Alberta. And it was very clear from the very beginning that we were never meant to be full participants in Canada, that we were there to benefit others. We saw this same attitude continue again with the National Energy Program. As a young child living in a small oil town in northern Alberta during that time, I remember sitting in class and wondering where all my classmates had gone. As the town emptied out, and eventually my family also walked away from our home and went somewhere else. That was a devastating time in our lives. In 1987, Secretary of State David Crombie introduced the Canadian Multiculturalism Act. He declared the act would promote the full and equitable participation of individuals and communities of all origins in, and this is where it gets really important, the continuing evolution and shaping of all aspects of Canadian society. That was the whole point of the Multiculturalism Act. In the ensuing 39 years, we have witnessed the continuous evolution and shaping of Canadian society, to the point that our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, declared that there is no core identity, no mainstream in Canada. Our current Prime Minister cannot decide what Canadian values are and keeps claiming other cultures' values as our own. We now have a justice system that considers your ancestral background and perhaps your immigration status before sentencing. We have witnessed a former world-class immigration system reduced to what now equates to open borders. We see ethnic enclaves throughout all of our major cities and a subsequent lack of cohesion throughout Canadian society. And we all experienced COVID, where we once again witnessed the divisive tactics being used on Canadians, as our Prime Minister called those who chose to remain unvaccinated derogatory names and wondered aloud if we should tolerate these people. The constant and never-ending pitting of one group of Canadians against another has taken its toll on Canadian society and on us as individuals. It has kept the elite in power and us regular folk too distracted to see what is really happening. A year ago, my good friend Kathy Flett and I formed the Alberta Women's Independence Network. Our purpose in doing this was to hold small meetings in women's homes or local cafes and restaurants all across the province to discuss the state of Canada and what our options were to bring about change. Our focus has been on education, building community through respectful dialogue, and conveying a message of hope. After sitting with literally thousands of men and women throughout the province in these smaller, intimate meetings, I think I understand now what we as Albertans must absolutely do to be successful in this. In 2024, retired Canadian Armed Forces Colonel David Redmond published a paper for the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. While Colonel Redmond has stated he does not support Alberta independence, in his paper he outlines 6 national interests, or pillars, that are essential to a strong, free, and prosperous nation. I think they are worth looking at through the lens of Alberta independence. And these are the 6 pillars: unity, national security, good governance, protection of rights and freedoms, economic prosperity and growth, and personal and community well-being. Colonel Redmond, in talking about unity, stated, "Unity is the core value for a country. A cultural unity is based on common shared ethics, values, and beliefs. This is what has been truly missing in our Canadian society, and this is something that as Albertans, if we are to become our own independent state, we must embrace. Without unity, we cannot put all those other pillars into place in a way where they will last. All efforts will eventually fail without a strong underpinning of unity." But unity is hard. It's a little bit of an ambiguous thing. We can talk about economics, we can talk about specific freedoms, but to talk about unity, how do we define that? Well, again, we can go back to what Colonel Redmond says. A cultural unity is based on common shared ethics, values, and beliefs. So what are some of these common shared ethics, values, and beliefs that you as an Albertan cherish and adhere to? We've already heard some of them tonight from the other speakers. We're talking about rights and freedoms, individual responsibility, equality, respect, resilience, hard work ethic, grit, innovation, entrepreneurship. The list could go on. But ultimately, all of these must lead to patriotism and a national pride. What can we as individuals do to promote unity around these shared values, ethics, and beliefs? Our isolation from one another keeps the elites in power. Our connection with each other destroys that power and that influence. I am convinced that at this stage, the game will only be won through one-on-one interactions with our families and friends. We need to step out from behind our keyboards and get involved. The fact that you are here tonight tells me that you are willing to do just that. Getting involved does not mean having to stand at the front and be the speaker. It's simply something as easy as coming to a meeting and bringing a friend with you. Your heartfelt invitation to a family member, a friend, or neighbor to get together over coffee will do more to build connection and unity than any number of electronic messages that you can send. If this is something that feels too far out of your comfort zone, consider bringing in reinforcements. Myself, Kathy, and a number of ladies all across the province would love to join you and your friends for coffee and dessert and help lead the needed conversations. Collectively and individually, we must be aware of tactics that are used to divide us as a people. When we see them being used, call them out. I don't care if they are a current politician or a former politician. Call them out. Do not fall into the trap and engage in name-calling, othering, or other divisive behaviors. We must rise above this. We can rise above this as Albertans. Find the common ground with each other and with those outside of our immediate circles and build on that commonality. 6 years ago, I joined the independence movement through the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta, serving as the Constituency Association President for Cardston-Siksika. Later, I became involved with the party on a provincial level. I had a front row seat to the tactics used to bring down the independence movement, the same tactics that have been used over and over and over again in the past 5 decades. While we need to stay focused on the tasks at hand of gathering signatures and then educating enough Albertans to achieve a successful referendum on independence in October, we need to be wary of anyone that would put themselves forward as a leader of this movement who engages in any tactic that divides, shuts down conversations, or uses fear-mongering. This is something that we just simply need to be aware of. I often think of my childhood, somewhat chaotic, somewhat idyllic, in the 70s and 80s, and some of the games that we used to play on the playground. And if any of you might know this. Red Rover, we call Marty over. And then what happens? Okay, so we had 2 teams. And the idea was that we were going to build a wall together, right? We're facing each other, and we're holding on to each other's hands so tight. Or maybe we've linked our arms. And the idea is that when we call Marty over from the other side, he is going to run as hard as he can, and he is going to try and break through that wall. And it was painful. So either you were being smashed by some other kid just coming barreling at you, or if you were strong enough with your team and connected enough, you were basically going to clothesline that guy and he was going down, right? They don't let them play that game anymore. But I often think about that as an analogy for how we as Albertans need to be. Are we standing shoulder to shoulder? Are we resolute in our determination to achieve everything that has already been described here tonight? What if we achieved everything that was described tonight, but we all hated each other, or we were disconnected and we didn't communicate and there was no community? It would all be for naught, be for nothing. I truly do believe that as we fight for these other more tangible things, we also need to be fighting against basically the programming that has been used on us for decades to isolate ourselves from each other and to keep us apart. We need to fight that. We can fight that. I am 100% convinced that unity is at the core of any successful nation. I get so excited about this when I think about all the opportunities ahead of us. And if we're doing it together in a celebratory way, how exciting is that? How wonderful is that? We had a September 1st, an Alberta Day celebration at my bed and breakfast down outside of Waterton this last September. And the whole community came out. It was just a giant barbecue, so much fun. And it was this wonderful feeling of community and connection. And we need to see that all across the province. And it happens with each one of us as individuals and as families as we reach out to each other. My challenge to you tonight is to go forward with the goal of creating unity in Alberta through your individual efforts and through your efforts as a movement. We can be that light on the hill for other Albertans and for other Canadians who crave and need what we have here in Alberta. Thank you.
Just as she said the part about be wary of the person who tries to get you to stop speaking, I'm flashing her 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Like, oh no. She didn't mean me. Okay. Keith, would you like to come up for a bit? Come on, let's get him up here. We've got to keep it under 6 minutes, so okay.
Okay, I wasn't expecting this. I was just trying to be an observer and take it all in. Wow, you put me on the spot. That doesn't happen very often. What can I tell you? I'd say this. Am I in the right spot? A little to the left? We're good? Okay. Many times I reflect about what I'm doing and how much effort I'm putting into this. And am I doing the right thing? And every time I reflect on that question, and with increasing clarity when I reflect on that question, I know the answer. And the simple truth is, by every objective and practical measure, it makes tremendous sense for Alberta to become independent. It's that simple. I've been watching with interest and concern what's happening in the world right now with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. And there's the obvious, there's the oil. Well, we're okay. We're okay for that because we have the third largest reserve of oil. There's a shortage of natural gas now for reasons you've been following with the blowing up of plants and also just trapping the ships that transport it. We're okay for that. But there's something else that's about to happen, which is a lot of those ships ship fertilizer. And there's increasing concern in the United States about the ability of farmers in Iowa and across the Great Plains to get enough fertilizer to put their crops in. There's the latest one from today is we're about to hit a global shortage of sulfuric acid, which is used in mining and industrial processes. Acute shortage of diesel. Have you seen what's happening in Australia? They're going into COVID-level lockdowns. Alberta has 5 refineries. Australia, think about how big it is, has 2. We produce 3 to 4 times as much gasoline, jet fuel, diesel in a day than they do in the whole country of Australia. We are a net exporter of nitrogen-based and urea fertilizers. We also produce significant amount of sulfuric acid. In other words, when you look at the things that are bringing the global economy to a halt, Alberta has them in spades and on scale that most other countries, just about every other country, doesn't have. So why are we not the most prosperous nation on the earth? Why are we in the situation we're in? We know why. because we have deliberate ideological policies from Ottawa with a structure that allows them to determine our kids' future, to rob them of their future. So I would just close by saying, I didn't expect to get brought up. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm so happy everybody's here. I just wanted to come. I'm usually at the front of the room. I wanted to sneak in. Nobody knew I was coming. Brought my wife with me. She's a canvasser, by the way, if anybody hasn't signed. And experience it from the other side. And I'm glad I did. But be clear in your mind, again, by every practical measure, this makes sense. The insanity is only that it's gone on so long. There's going to be, we're going to hit the numbers. There's going to be a referendum. There's going to be lots of confusion along the way. There's going to be lots of people saying things like, oh, it's not going to work now. Myself and others have gamed out every possible scenario, so we're ready for everything they're going to throw at us. There's a pathway to success. I'm working with some other people right now, and it's not public, although a few people know about it. It's called the Alberta Transition Council. High-level people. We're putting together a detailed transition plan for how Alberta will move from a province to an independent country, including term sheets for negotiations with Ottawa, simultaneous negotiations with Ottawa and Washington, so that when we vote on October 19th, we can start the process of transition the day after. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And that's the correct use of transition, by the way. Just to be clear about that. We're going to now start the Q&A, everybody, so I'll ask the speakers to come back up. And you guys will share the mic, and I got this one for the audience. But what do you think? A little special extra at the end there? I got to tell you, I was like a fanboy. I saw him come right down the hallway. Like, whoa, Keith Wilson's here. We better be good. I hope you enjoyed yourself as an observer there, Keith. We'll go ahead and reach to the crowd. So if you guys have some questions, come up over by the door, and we'll get you going. You won't be on the camera, but we'll go ahead and bring it to the... Sure. We'll make sure this reaches you. Yep, it reaches. Sure. Listen to this guy. Oh, and thank you very much to Max for doing all the streaming and getting this going. Yeah. And Critical Compass in the back there, Mike and James, thank you very much. Rose, Benita, all the people that help in their way to get this message out there. We have about 5 or 6 times more people watching online that's in this room. So take a look around, and there's about 5 or 6 times more people there. 450 people watching. On yours, and then we got these ones as well. So amazing. Thank you. We got some questions already. Right on. All right, I'm on my way. We good? There we go.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mitch Lazaroff. I came to Alberta having previously spent some time in high school after my parents passed and lived with my grandparents in Calgary in the early 80s. But I came here to work as a machinist in 2001 and have been here ever since. My heart's really beating right now. I'm not used to this. But I have 3, hopefully I'll remember all the 3 things I had. And the first one was about corporate ownership. And I've looked at who actually owns the pipelines and who actually owns all of Alberta's energy and resources in the West. And I've looked at it and I've compared it to why we are so far behind it in comparison to the G7. And it looks like that money in our corporate ownership is over 75%, at least in the energy sector, and a lot of that is south of the border. And whereas I don't like the idea of nationalism, I think that would invite strife and conflict. I would love to see that somehow turned down to 49%. And I really do not like to see those dividends enriching a very small percentage. And not a lot of people talk about that. And they just talk about Ottawa and how we can reduce those monies heading east, when actually there's a lot more money heading into a small percentage. And I really don't like this is moreover, so that's a general kind of thing, but, and I really don't like the rhetoric and the controlled narrative that we need outside investment. We have strong, hardworking Albertans, and I don't understand why we need, like as Marty was saying, how we need to, go to the other countries to find funding. It just seems so. It just doesn't seem right, and perhaps I'm naive. The other comment I had was, we have, through the revolving red and blue doors, our Conservatives in the Harper era sold a large chunk of our energy to China, and China has control with CNOC and all sorts of things of our pipelines, and granted they are a customer, and I appreciate a multipolar world in what's going on right now, although I do not like the fact that that the huge pharmaceutical sector in China, like ours and what they did here in the recent pandemic, was, okay, sorry.
What's your question?
My question is, we have a huge problem with an endemic with fentanyl, and on the one hand, we have China investing.
Good job. Thank you for the question. That's it. Your time is up.
Okay, pardon me. My question was.
No, okay, no.
What can we do in the face of China investment? We have other people.
Thank you.
So I'll answer your question real quickly. I'll answer your question. So the resources in Alberta belong to the people of Alberta. Okay, that doesn't change. That won't change. And everybody mistakenly says that companies like CNOC or Texaco or CNRL own the resources. No, they don't. They are basically hired by the government to extract the resources on our behalf, so they get to keep a portion of the profit, and then the rest goes back to the province in the form of royalties. If you look at just this week, up until now, for this year, Alberta was running a $9 billion deficit, and suddenly, because of the war in the Gulf, that deficit's been completely erased because of the revenue that the government of Alberta is getting from royalties. So that's a quick answer. Second answer, it's called trade. And so this whole idea, we make oil and somebody else makes, I don't know, T-shirts or wool or pineapples, and so we have to trade with other people. If we only sold to ourselves, then we'd run out of customers real quick. And this whole idea of only buy from us, then somebody else won't. If we only buy from ourselves, then nobody else will buy from us. So it's called trade. And the reason, and we are a small economy. We think we're big. When I was building projects, sure, I'd love to get financing from only Canadian sources, but the reality is there's just not enough. So we needed foreign capital to come in and invest in our country. That money then is here and we reinvest it. It's called trade. So I don't know, Fergus, you probably want to add on that?
Thanks for being here, sir. Just a quick comment. There are already laws on the books to prevent, let's say, destabilizing or unhealthy foreign investors. They are not applied. And this is, again, the problem that if we have such an anti-American sentiment in Ottawa, they're obviously going to side with China, which I see as problematic. So I also, just a comment, I am concerned about economic nationalism at a local level in terms of cutting off Alberta from the world. I agree that free trade has to be pivotal to the new nation.
Next question? Just keep it to a question, okay?
Yep. I'm a canvasser. There's several canvassers in the room. What is being done to make sure there's no fraud in both the petition and the election or the vote in October? What can we do to assure there's no fraud?
Bill 54.
Well, that's a loaded question. So I'll speak from a canvassing point of view. Yeah, there's the potential for fraud, but there's controls in place to try and prevent people from illegally collecting signatures or people collecting signatures and not turning them in. So we're using forms for canvassing that have serial numbers, and the serial numbers have been assigned to people. So and I tracked my own serial numbers just out of curiosity. So somebody gave me my sheets with my serial numbers, and I made a little note of them, and then I turned them back in. And at some point, I could verify that my sheets were handed in. So there are controls in place. But what's the broader part of your question? I mean, we do. Keith is stepping up. I mean, are you suggesting that our electoral system is flawed? That's a whole other. I'll let Keith take that one.
You trust Elections Alberta? Holy smokes. Buddy, I got a bridge in New York, and it's just for you. Just for you. No one else. It's called the Brooklyn Bridge. You'll recognize it. Two things. First of all, based on my discussions with Mitch Sylvester, the plan is that before submitting all of the signature sheets to Elections Alberta, who regrettably has overtly, on repeated occasions, demonstrated a strong viewpoint that they hate us and will do everything they can to obstruct this process, that all those sheets will first go to an accounting firm, a trusted CA accounting firm. Elections Alberta put on their website and in their announcement their vetting and verification process. Each page they do this, each other signature they do this, and so on. So we know their process. That accounting firm will replicate that process. It will then prepare a report stamped and sealed, confidential to Mitch. So before those forms go in to Elections Alberta, we'll already know the count. So if somebody wants to spill some coffee on some of them, or some of them end up in a dumpster, we'll know. With respect to the referendum, there's going to be an announcement, I don't think it's out yet, but it'll be coming soon, that they're modifying, the Smith government's modifying the legislation so that when the referendum vote occurs after October 19th, Mitch Sylvester will be allowed to designate a scrutineer who will go into the room and verify and observe the vote count to make sure there's no funny business.
So we need to take care of Mitch Sylvester. He's got to make it to November.
Yeah. I'll just say I am concerned about foul play from the other side, and I do think that there will be maybe forms of lawfare or scrutiny going on. We've already seen a CBC hit piece on a prominent member of the independence movement, and so I am concerned also about things like freezing of accounts or what have you in the post-referendum period. So I actually have written about this. If you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll be glad to chat with you about what you can do to protect yourself from this. Take a question.
Okay, for the record, I was excellent at Red Rover.
Me too. You're on.
Fergus, I'm just wondering if you could expand a bit on the concept of currency competition and Panama and how that might benefit Alberta, because I know that's a question that always comes up. Then somebody could talk about pensions, because that one always comes up too.
Yeah, precisely. That's a great question. Right now, there are many countries around the world that have they use the US dollar or they have currency optionality. The most prominent one and successful one is Panama. Panama left Colombia just over a century ago, and they've never had a central bank. They have some local currency that works one-to-one with the US dollar, but basically they use the US dollar. The big problem is that we face increasing inflation. We're basically going back to a period of the 1970s, 1980s because of the fiscal shortfalls of our central governments in both the United States and Canada, and that just means we're going to have a higher level period of inflation for as long as we can foresee. And I want to see currency competition that is basically a form of accountability, and maybe we'll have cryptocurrencies become more widespread in the next decade. I'm not sure, but I don't want to, there's no position, I don't speak for the independence movement, but my preference would be for no central bank, and that would also limit the capacity of a central government to spend beyond its means. It would have to go out and get private lending rather than just printing the money to pay the bills.
Yeah, I've been working for a long time, and I'm totally insulted at what I'm about to get on Thursday night for a pension check for CPP. So what can we? What are we going to do about that? Like, what's?
Okay.
Because they got all that money, and they had. I heard $1 trillion. Now it's $2 trillion.
Mate, oh,
So-
look, I'm really glad you brought this up. This is a huge problem. The Canada Pension Plan is a Canada Ponzi plan. They owe, in my estimation, more than $2 trillion. They say they owe $1.5 trillion. That's because they discount the future payments by 6%. Guaranteed future payments should be discounted at a lower rate, which means they owe more. They only have about $500 billion in the bank in assets. So they owe 4 times as much as they have in assets. That's called an unfunded liability. Okay, if they were a private pension scheme, they would need to be audited, and it would be seen as a Ponzi scheme, because if there were not new people coming to pay in, they'd go broke within a decade. That's a Ponzi scheme. You need new members to pay for the old members, okay? And also there has been an estimate by the Fraser Institute that says that if Alberta were just doing this alone, the taxes would be 40% lower. My personal preference is for no government pension scheme at all. I mean, I'm more libertarian in this regard. And the fact is that if you just invested the money rather than going through the Canada Pension Plan, you would get 4 times the returns over the years. It is a terrible return. And that they put out these fancy reports, but in the deep down in the footnotes, you have to go deep down. You see that they are way behind what they claim to be to have in store. Okay.
Keith, if Alberta today had its own pension plan, it has to be better or equal to the Canada pension plan. But would an independent Alberta be bound by any kind of rules, or could it come up with its own pension, as Fergus suggested?
There's another problem with the Canada Pension Plan. One of the reasons why it performs poorly is that, you can guess this already, social engineers have gotten in there and they're manipulating what goes. They want this ethical investing, which means DEI, ESG, all this garbage, rather than just focusing on simple returns for the people. And also just in general, corporations are going away from defined benefit pension plans, and so are even government workers in the United States, because it's inherently unstable. You should have a defined contribution. You put in and you have your own account, and then you get it out when you retire, rather than going to some pool that can be rife with corruption or misuse.
And this is not a radical idea. Quebec does this right now, and their returns are better, and they have less resources than we do. So just consider that. This is not a radical idea that Alberta has its own. That's true. They got our resources. There you go.
Hi, my name is Gerald. First of all, I'd just like to thank Jason for holding this event, and each and every one of you. I learned so much. My grandson is 21 years old. Actually, 22. I also have another one who's 21. But the 22-year-old wanted to be here so badly, but he couldn't make it. He was hampered by the weather, and. But this question, he asked me he wanted to ask a question, but he texted me earlier, and he asked me to ask you this here. And this is something that's very dear to him. And also, you know, according to him, to a lot of his friends, meaning the young people that he knows, right? We're talking about the 20-year-old age group. And what he asked me to ask you, one of you, does anybody have a plan to reverse the immigrations that's happened over the last 10 years? And, you know, what are the views on that? I mean, you know, my parents came, speaking for myself, my parents came over here from Europe, you know, to seek a better life. But they came over on merit. And they didn't come here asking, you know, what the country could give them. Back then, the question was, what do you have to offer Canada? My his reply was, well, I'm a tradesman. I'm actually a carpenter. And they said, great, we need more people like you. We need tradesmen, because this is a young nation, and we wanted to build it, right? So here we are.
Maybe you want to take that one?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is also very near and dear to my heart. I'm only a second-generation Canadian. You know, with my grandfather, or my father's side coming from Germany and my mother's side coming from Italy. And again, they came in on the same thing, on merit, right? And they worked hard, and you hear the stories of them, you know, homesteading in northern Saskatchewan, that type of thing. And I think I don't think it's going to be as difficult as it kind of seems monumental right now, because we have been so overrun through an immigration system that no longer works, right? Like I said, it's kind of like an open door policy. But we had a system that was based on merit. And my idea, my thought would be that we roll it back to where it once was, right? Now, I am married to a new Canadian who 6 years ago came here and embraced what we have and contributes, and for the last 6 years has been in the background behind me supporting my efforts for Alberta independence, because he sees the dream and he sees what we have and what we can do. And those are the types of people that we need to come and join us. And we are going to have many people who are going to see what we have and want to be a part of that. And we need to be open to that. And at the same time, also very judicious in who comes in, what they are bringing to the table, and what they are willing to do once they get here. And so I don't think it is the huge monumental task that it kind of feels like and looks like right now. But that's just my thought. I'm sure there are other ideas.
I'll just add a little bit. So the numbers for 2025 came out. The population of Canada actually went down in 2025 for the first time in its history, because the boost in the immigration, what appears to be immigration, the increase in the population in the last couple of years is actually temporary foreign workers. So it's not a lot of immigrants. It's mostly temporary foreign workers. So our immigration did work, and I think it's pretty easy to bring it back to the way it was. But we people in this room need to do one thing for that to happen. The reason there's that we've been increasing immigration is because we are lavishing ourselves with benefits that we cannot afford. And we need to bring in temporary foreign workers to try and boost the productivity and bring in these taxpayers. Now, that's a Band-Aid solution that didn't work, and that's why they're reversing it. But if we don't stop our government's insatiable appetite for spending, they're going to keep having to bring in people. That's just a problem that, immigration is the symptom of a bigger problem. But otherwise, immigration is part of our culture. I mean, everybody here, I dare say, is probably an immigrant, right?
Yeah, so I share the sentiment. My grandparents came here, right? And my grandfather even spoke French, and that helped him get in on merit, right? I am concerned about this issue also because I see immigration often used as a political weapon to change the demographics and change the voting preferences. We here have a very distinct audience that believe in, natural rights, liberty. This is not universal. People don't understand these all around the world. And so the difference will just be, in my opinion, we don't know what the exact immigration system will look like, but it will be Albertans who choose that rather than Ottawa choosing that. That's the difference. And I have confidence that Albertans will choose the right process there.
I would almost kind of expect, too, that while Albertans are choosing that and what exactly it's going to look like, or our point system and the merits needed to come to Alberta, that we might need almost a pause to allow our infrastructure to catch up with the overflow that we have at the moment.
Do you support the government of Alberta taking increased control over immigration for the purpose of decreasing immigration to more sustainable levels? We don't need a referendum on that. I don't think we need those questions, Danielle Smith. Next question.
Thank you. I'm a enthusiastic supporter of Alberta independence. I have a Facebook page with 38,000 followers called Alberta Independence Movement. I share lots of your material. My name's Benita Peterson. We need to reach more people in that other mindset. I find it at some of these events, as terrific as they are, sometimes we're preaching to the choir. The people in the room are already the supporters. How do we effectively connect with the people in that other mindset? I'd like to suggest that insulting them is not the way. Calling them names is not the way. If we're hostile to the people in that other mindset, we fail to win them over. So we need to connect. So I've got a couple of proposals, and I want your suggestions on this. Let's spend money on mainstream media advertising, including CBC, Edmonton Journal, Edmonton Sun, etc. And let's put ads that support Alberta independence. In order to do that, we have to become third-party advertisers. So I suggest we need at least 10 third-party advertisers during the referendum campaign, raising money, spending it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I like your ideas of that. I think for engaging with the public, it's the most important part is that civil discourse and creating that space that we can actually operate with some grace. Because I think a lot of the hostility comes from either not knowing or from fear. And those are both warranted because independence and forming a new nation is scary. It's intimidating, it's overwhelming, there's a lot of parts to it. So I don't feel that that's unjust of them to feel that way, but we can't meet them with the same resistance and the hostility. It has to be a place where people can actually come and ask questions and be able to get some answers and have discussion. I know in the social media world, it gets a little hostile sometimes, but honestly, like I'm not a Marty, so my sphere of influence is very small, but I come from a farming background and I speak that kind of language out there. When people come with attacks, which is very few, I just kind of dismiss them and wish them a better day and move on to the next topic. But most people are coming actually with some valid questions and just want some answers and that space to be able to discuss things.
Speaking directly to the idea of the 10 third-party advertisers, I say 20. Like, let's go more. And the reason for this, and this is where my history kind of skews, I don't know, my way of thinking. So when I was with the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta, I had a front row seat to see exactly how they take down this movement. And when we read Michael Wagner or we listen to Corey Morgan or read his book, we understand very quickly that there is a pattern. There is a pattern. And, you know, in the last year, and I don't hear it so much, but it used to be that people would be like, oh, all the independence people need to come under one umbrella. You guys all need to work together. You need to come together. One, we are working together, okay? We do talk. Oftentimes it's behind the scenes, and there might be some strategizing behind the scenes. But the danger of all of the effort and the work being done by one or two large organizations is you might as well paint a giant target on your back. Now we are playing whack-a-mole. We have Marty, we have my group, we have the APP, we have Fergus, we have Jason, we have Keith putting out his videos and Corey Morgan. They don't know, and I say they, and it's the folks who have been at this for the last 4 decades, making sure that Alberta independence never gets off the ground. They don't know where to go. They can't be at every meeting. They can't be taking down every single individual who is speaking loudly. So when I say 20, 1, that's wonderful. 2, it protects the movement. Eventually, we will all come together, like that unity that I was talking about, and we will choose leaders and all that stuff. We're not there yet. It's not the time for that yet. But I love your idea, Benita. We absolutely have to go there.
I'm just going to flip it a little bit. I agree. Love the idea. I'd love nothing more than $10 million budget to do advertising. But there's a problem, which is a problem that another reason why we need to separate. The media in current Canada is not impartial. In fact, it's in conflict of interest because it's paid for by the government. So in a separate Alberta, that will be one of the tenets of our separate Alberta, is a true independent media. You know, Jason is independent media. We're independent media. Sure, I have my biases, he has his biases, but he's not in a conflict of interest because he's not paid for by the government. So I'm just highlighting that. I love your idea, but it's a difficult thing in this Canada, but in our Alberta, we'll have a free media.
Just one comment. I'm very concerned about this also, about there being a large swath of people and basically getting the right message to them first. And so, as Angela said, closer? Okay, yeah. So, no, my sense is that it really will be the one-on-one conversations that change this. I'm not an expert on political advertising, so I won't comment on that, but I mentioned at our previous event, we should consider why Brexit succeeded. I think that's the best precedent for us to consider. And why was that? It was not because of one individual or one political party or a political advertisement. In my opinion, it was this affection for a distinct identity. And that is where I think Alberta really has a win. If you look online, the Alberta independence people are crushing it. All the image memes or videos about Alberta because there's something to be proud of here. And we don't know, we have less pride in Ottawa, right? So to me, people like this gentleman here wearing the hat and the hoodie, they're a living witness basically that I'm proud of this identity. And I think that will resonate with people more than discussing politicians or whatever it may be, but just a way of life and identity that you can be proud of.
So we're at the end of the audience questions, but I have a question for all of you, and then I'm going to turn it on to the audience as well. We'll start with Angela. What was your turning point? When did you know it was time to leave?
Like so many people, it was probably COVID. I mean, I had been, like I explained before, my eyes were being opened, and I was seeing kind of what was going on. But definitely, COVID was the thing that kind of, I was like, okay, I'm in. We got to do this.
Okay. Yeah, so I went to a conference, the Manning Center conference in Ottawa back in 2009, and there they were trying to decide what the Conservative political party of Canada stood for, and people didn't really know. They were struggling, to be frank. We had Flanagan, the author of the book about Harper's Rise, and he said basically, I don't want to waste time on this. And I realized that at that time, there wasn't really any push for limited government. And also that not only was there not a push for it, but many in the Conservative Party would staunchly resist an end to supply management and an end to equalization because they were from Nova Scotia or wherever it may be. And I thought, why are we even here? What's the point? You know, I don't understand. And I just realized that even within the quote-unquote Conservative Party of Canada, there's really little that can be done. And that Alberta, so that was 15, 16 years ago now. So a long time ago, I thought the Confederation was stuck.
I think for me, I was a little slow to becoming a separatist or working for independence. I think that being out on the farm, we tend to have very libertarian hearts. We're out on the farm, you're kind of removed from a lot of things, and you get involved in your work and your hands are in the dirt and you're very connected to the land, and you just kind of, you stay out of the business of the rest of the world. So, of course, COVID came along, and I realized right away that we were not allowed to ask questions, which made me question things. And then the convoy happened, and it was like a huge eye-opener to realize that we weren't all alone in this, and that there was this big unity movement. And then it was so disappointing to know that they were not going to be listened to. So we couldn't ask questions, and we weren't going to be heard. I started volunteering right away with the Alberta Prosperity Project. And even then, I was still like a big proponent for making sure that we had a sovereign Alberta within or without Canada. And we had that branded on everything, and I pushed hard for that, and I wanted within to come first. And then the federal election happened, and that was really like the last nail in the coffin for me, that no matter what, all the campaigning we did, all the door knocking, the rise of Pierre Poilievre, and he was just riding that huge wave of popularity in all his rallies, and still we were shut down. So like after all those things, like eventually you can't ignore it at some point and realize that we are not going to affect any change from within.
Yeah, for me, it was when I was working. It was around 2015, 16 when so when we were trying to advance Keystone XL, we started conceiving of Energy East. So Energy East was going to be a pipeline that transported oil from Hardisty all the way to New Brunswick. And we poured our hearts into it. We did $1 million worth of engineering every day for 3 years, and we did $1 billion. The application was this thick. Just to put it into context, just translating that application to French was $3.2 million. And we got blocked every step of the way. And ultimately, it was the mayor of Montreal, Denis Coderre, who said, "What's in it for us?" Right? Like that big, "What's in it for us?" And it got killed. And I happened to be in Quebec at the time, and I swear I heard a collective cheer. Like not just in the room. It's as if the whole province was cheering the fact that they had beat down Alberta and defeated us. And I was like, yeah, I'm done. So that was me.
Keith, can we get you in there for this one?
Well, mine goes back a little further. When I was in my 20s, I was working on my first degree in political science, and I was working in the government in a ministerial adjacent type position in the policy secretariat of the Department of Agriculture. And the Mulroney government had just brought in the Green Plan. This was the first kickoff for the Green era and paranoia about the environment. And because the Green Plan had been announced, deputy ministers from Ottawa quickly dispatched and flew across the country to have emergency meetings with the deputy ministers of the provinces because they had to figure out how to implement this Green Plan. And so the deputy minister was supposed to go, but he couldn't go. So the assistant deputy was supposed to go, he couldn't go. So the director was supposed to go, so he couldn't go. The branch head was supposed to go, so he couldn't go. So this 27-year-old, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed me found myself in this room filled with provincial deputy ministers and federal deputy ministers. And the one thing that blew my mind and had this massive epiphany was one of the things they were going to do was this big program for trees. And I suddenly realized, oh, the federal government has no jurisdiction over any land where there's trees in Alberta. And then they were going to do something on water. And I was like, oh, you don't have any. And I suddenly realized, what the hell does the federal government really do after all? And working in government and having a background in political science, I was just like, my goodness, so many people think that Crown land means federal land. It doesn't. So many people think that the hospitals are actually run by the federal government or they're paid for by the federal government. It was just this massive, eye-opening experience that the federal government actually does very few things in your life in terms of providing a role, but then when time went on, I saw how they interfered with everything. So that was it. And then, of course, when Justin Trudeau got elected, I remember I got asked to go on Rebel News with Ezra, and I said, Canada just died.
Wow. And for me, it was the federal election, so April 2020 or 2025, when the Uniparty had more power than ever before. All the other parties destroyed, and the election was called before we were done. So we don't have a say, representation. Anybody want to share their turning points moment? Don't be shy. Do you want to try?
Sure. It was after 9/11. Yeah, I saw how the false flag attacks were motivated through media, and I saw how the media worked, and I saw the disingenuous rhetoric motivating people to go fight for another country. And I haven't looked back, and I really appreciate everybody being here, and especially you up front. And thank you for finding a question out of my previous ramblings.
Yeah, when you lose trust in your government, you remember that moment, for sure. Anybody else want to share their moment? You can say it, yeah. Yeah, I'll come to you.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. You hold
Go ahead.
I'm an old lady, and I was 11 years old. I was 11 years old when I realized Canada was working exactly the way it was supposed to, and it was done. It was never going to work for Alberta. I got in trouble at school all the time, and I'm a first-generation Canadian. And never felt patriotic, never felt like I fit in this Canada that they kept trying to push on me that I knew wasn't real. It wasn't real, and I knew it. And lots of fights in grade 6 with my social studies teacher, lots of fights with the principal, lots of fights with my parents because they had to always come and pick me up again. And I even called, because I was 11, or 12 at maybe, Trudeau a tomato head. And okay, I was 11. But I got in trouble for that. I was disrespectful. I had no understanding of really what Canada was, but I did. And so my entire life, I have been waiting and praying for this moment. And people, we're here. I would also like to thank everybody here, but also for the canvassers, because without you, we couldn't do this. And 1, 2, 3, let's go.
Anybody else waiting their whole life for this? Yeah?
Keith may be nervous that I'm speaking.
Oh, no worries.
For me, as a retired nurse, it was COVID. I was looking at all the crazy things they were having us do, and my training in infection protocol did not align with what they were suggesting we do. In the beginning, they told us not to mask. It's an infectious disease, supposedly, that they didn't know, not saying that COVID isn't real, but that's what you do with an infectious disease if you don't know the mode of transmission. It's mask, glove, gown, goggles, isolation, all these things. And yes, they were locking us down, but the first thing they said was, don't mask. And I questioned that. I thought, why in the world would they tell us? So then I'm now not just taking their word, I'm looking at what they're saying. Who determined 6 feet was safe? Who determined the arrows in the grocery store? Who determined what stores could open and why? And why would big box stores be able to be open and not mom and pop shops if they maintained the same infection protocol? It just did not add up. I was not happy. Our family was not happy with how things were going. And I told my husband that he needed to volunteer his time and find a legal challenge that he could put his heart and soul behind. And he chose the unvaccinated travel mandate challenge. And I would have never known when I asked him to do that where we would be today, but I don't regret a single second of it.
And I said the 2 smartest words a man's ever said to his wife. Yes, dear.
Yes, dear. Do we have anybody who wants to share another story? How about a young person, too? I'm coming to you guys.
The first go around for me was back in the National Energy Program when Alberta put their team of people together with Peter Lougheed, filled the 737 full of people, headed to Ottawa, and all Pierre Trudeau did was stuck his finger in their face and told them, we're done. You guys, we own you, basically, is what he was saying. And then, so since the first Trudeau, I've been called separatist, independence, whatever. And then Justin Trudeau just put the nail in it there in 2015 by saying Canada had no core identity. That was it. That was a nail.
You look fantastic in that hat, and you can find that hat for sale outside, by the way. How about a young person? How about you? No? No? How about this young man right here? Why did you decide to get involved?
Honestly, quite frankly, like the vaccine and the passport and the mandate and all that, like crap, really. Like, I mean, as Canadians, I was born under my both parents. They told me, hey, you got freedom, you got rights. Nobody's allowed to touch you. If somebody touches you, it's a problem. So it came along, and it's like I came to realize, like, you got to put a mask on. You got to. It's just pathetic, really, like for what it is. And I just didn't tolerate it. Go to Cineplex, go to anywhere, scream at everybody, like just a ton of people. Hey, are you guys all sheeple? Like, what's going on? Just waking up people's minds for what it is. I'm not just control, and then digital currency and digital vaccine and Bill C9 and all this rhetoric that's going on. So we got to put a plug to this now, or it's just going to get worse. So that's what led me.
Fantastic. Max got one?
But I have my own microphone, so that's good. So I think that what's important is to relay the information to people. What actually snapped me on independence was, in fact, when Mark Carney was, in fact, installed, not elected, actually installed. And also I worry, the reason why I'm pushing on independence is because I want the future generation to perhaps be better off to what we are right now. It seems that what seems to be right now is just the Canada that I was new back 20 years ago when my parents came here no longer exists. And I think that as for Angela and a lot of our immigrants are on the same boat as I am, are basically saying that what we have here in Canada doesn't longer exist. So that's where basically I snapped and I'm working independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Max.
And for myself, just like this lady over here, I think I was about 11. It was when the first Trudeau ran, and I learned from my parents, who had very good connections within the police agencies, that Pierre Trudeau was a communist. So I think at that point in my life, I was all Albertan and to hell with Canada. And I am so happy today to see that we've gotten to this stage right now.
I don't want to stop you from talking because I'm taking a note from Angela. But does anybody else have anything else they want to add? Another question? We got one back here? Okay.
Just going forward with convincing friends, relatives that aren't on board with myself in a putting it lightly and just coming across not strong, because my voice can be very strong when I get involved with things. It's really hard when I've talked to a few people already in my profession that I know real well, and they're already Trump. Trump comes up right away. Trump's going to just take care of, they're going to take Alberta over, and it's just gone. Right away, conversation's over. So I can't go there. So I just hope that the canvassers are able to hit some of the houses if that's what our plan is. I don't know if that's what it is, or if I can drag a couple of them here, but I guess I can't tie them up. So anyway, I just have concern about that, because when you grow up with people all your life and in a small community, and then you talk about this and you don't understand how come they can't see the other side, but they bring up Trump right away, they've already been brainwashed that way, which is no good, in my view of it.
Fantastic. So what can the people here today do to open those conversations and open some of those minds?
I think you've put your finger on the button there. The big problem is demonization, okay? That this is basically, in my view, mind control. It shuts down dialogue, it shuts down thinking, just throwing dirty words at people or pejoratives. And I don't think there is an easy solution except one-on-one. Like I said, because I will admit this, when I came from New Zealand, I did not understand the gun rights, right? Even though we had them on the farm, just the idea of gun rights for natural defense. And I remember I had the media manipulation or thinking that people who believed in gun rights must be these nuts from the woods. Anyway, I had an instructor in university, and he wore an NRA gun rights shirt. And I thought, oh, he's a peaceful guy. Right? It's amazing how just a direct contact with someone who's sober, peaceful, will change hearts and minds. And it just made me realize that this negative stereotype or archetype was not true.
So it all comes down to messaging, right? And as we're talking about tonight, and I love the fact that you are reaching out to people one-on-one. There's a couple different things. There's probably 30% that we will never be able to reach. And we just kind of need to accept that. And we're probably 30, 35, 40%, whatever we are right now, of folks who are on board. It's that mushy middle that we need to go for, that we really need to be focusing on right now. If what you're doing, reaching out to folks or sending them videos or whatever, if it's not working, we have a little time. Dial it back. Allow that relationship to open up again, and always be on the lookout for those opportunities. But it's as you said, with your professor, he's a peaceful guy. And if people see that we are excited, that we are hopeful, that despite all the craziness going on around us, that we are confident that we have an option. You know, when COVID hit, I had so much anxiety. I never experienced that much anxiety in my life. I was pretty much a single mom at that time, and I had been working 3 jobs to support me and my daughter, and all 3 jobs disappeared. I had anxiety through the roof. When I accidentally became the constituency association president for the Wild Rose Independence Party, and it was literally an accident, kind of fell into it, all of a sudden everything changed because I realized, oh, wait a second, there is something I can do about this. And that anxiety left. And I think that our anxiety as Canadians is only growing greater and greater every day as we see the craziness. It seems like every day there's something new coming out of Ottawa that's crazy, or in the world. But if we can show we are engaged in something that is hopeful, that is exciting, we don't have that anxiety. Instead, we are motivated to do something. Our neighbors, our friends, our families, they will see it. They can't help but see that. And that's when they say, hey, then you go, this is what I'm doing, and this is what's important to me, and do you want to come learn more? You want to come for coffee or whatever, right? You make that connection. So you're always looking for those moments, and it's not flooding people with information. It's the invitation when you find the moment. And it takes patience, and it takes a little bit of work to understand when those moments come, but they will come. And again, we've got to be that light. And then people will just be drawn to it. They'll want what we have, and they'll be drawn to it, and those moments will open up.
Thank you very much for our speakers. Appreciate all of that. We'll just kind of move over here. Where do you want me, Max? Max will get you an online, so go and check out Freedom Calendar, share it with these people as well, have them watch it, and then say, hey, is there anything in there that you disagree with or want to talk about? That could open the conversation. I want to thank the Radisson because it was very difficult to get a venue in the Edmonton area. A lot of them said, no, no thanks, we don't want your money, keep that conversation out of here. Even Cineplex, you brought up Cineplex, they canceled 6 of my showings of a movie that's just a documentary. So they're shutting us down on that level, so thank you very much to Radisson. Thank you to my wife, who makes this happen. She absolutely makes this happen. And then, of course, thank you to all of you for coming out in that storm to be here today, take that risk to come see what we're talking about. I appreciate you all very, very much. This is not government funded in any way. So thank you for everybody that gave a little bit in that little donation bucket. Appreciate that. And until next time, love you all very much, and God bless.